Hi, I'm Alan Ross. I'm the managing editor of APC Media, or APC Technology Productions, Transformer Technology, Power Systems Technology. We are here at the RE Plus 2023 event in Las Vegas. This thing is huge. It seems like the battery storage people have come here. So we've got wind, solar, battery storage, and everything in between. But hope you enjoy these interviews. I love interviewing the technology of the future, and enjoy. My next guest is Hugo Navarro. Hugo, thank you. You are with Morgan Solar. We'll talk a little bit about Morgan Solar at the end of this, but tell me a little bit about yourself, your family life. I know you're from the Toronto area, grew up there, very important area to me.
Yeah, I got 2 kids, a wife, been in Toronto now since about 2009, which is when I joined Morgan Solar. I've been in the energy industry for quite some time, and had a previous career where I was working in high-tech startups. And my desire was to bring the two together and switch to the clean technology side. And then I discovered Morgan Solar, which was established in Toronto, and I've been with them since 2009.
Excellent. You are the Vice President of Finance and some other things, right?
Right.
Okay.
I'm the Vice President of Finance, but for a number of years when we developed new technologies, we would also need to develop projects to sort of act as proof points, showcases that we could show to other customers. And I would develop the projects, we would add our technology and sell it as a combo. So I got a lot of experience in the utility development cycle. And through that, I became a sort of in-house development expert. Okay. So I've got the finance side, but I'm also very familiar with the developer world.
So let's talk a little. You've been in solar for about 2009. That was the early, what I call the Wild West cowboy
Totally
days,
Wild
right?
West. Lots of options.
Yeah, lots of options. Talk about what's happened in the industry, and maybe even if you can say, hey, we seem to have been through these phases.
Right, so it is interesting because I think back in 2009, as you said, there was Solyndra, there was power towers, power troughs, lots of different forms of photovoltaic. Morgan Solar got to start doing what was called concentrated photovoltaics, which was using more efficient solar cells, more typically used in satellites, and finding a way to concentrate light onto them because they were very expensive. That was the way to make the economic value prop. The first big wave of consolidation was going to what was much more a supply chain play. Large volumes, hyper-efficient manufacturing that saw, frankly, a lot of the technology and the jobs all moving to South Asia and to China and away from places like North America and Europe. At the same time, it was consolidating around more standards that I think also made it a lot easier for people to understand what they were getting into. Right. Because it's obviously an industry that requires cooperation amongst the modules, the inverters, the racks, and all the electronics that sits between it. And some standardization, I think, led to the growth that we saw then in the teens. Right. At the same time, obviously, a lot of intellectual property and the value that comes from that was moving offshore, and some people started to feeling a little bit uncomfortable about how some of the things were evolving. And then, whatever, politics plays a role. Policy is one of the big sources of volatility in this industry, and from our perspective, I'd say that when the political winds changed a few years ago at the changing of leadership in various countries, you could feel it instantly. People were happy to talk about it again. There was a lot more renewed interest at the corporate level, at the regulatory level, and all of a sudden everything felt supercharged. And if it hadn't been for COVID, I think that sort of explosion of activity that we feel at this conference today, we would have been seeing then.
You said at this, I'm with you. I feel that sense of explosion. I went upstairs to the second floor and I thought, wow, storage and solar have come together. We've finally started to develop. We still haven't solved all of the interconnectivity problems, but for the first time, I feel like the word is scale. We seem to be producing at scale. We seem to be saying this is scalable for society, and nobody's saying, will it work, why does it work? As the government subsidies go away, now we have really good financial.
We have a lot of great proof that the lowest marginal cost electricity source is new solar. Yeah. Even more so than continuing with existing other sources. Yeah. So it is taking off in a way that it doesn't need the support that it once did, though we know because of the climate crisis that extra support to get it into the field faster is to the greater good. So that's been all, I think, a fantastic thing. And what you see here now is this surge again of interest in new technologies and new exploration because certain things have been run to their limit. And I mean, there's a lot of new manufacturers here, a lot of new options. And I think what we're most excited about is just the fact that to do all these things, I think relies on information and relies on data. And so you see a lot of offerings on the monitoring, the analytics and that sort of thing. And of course, as you mentioned, bringing in storage, because this is not just about generating electricity, but making it serve people well. And that doesn't mean it has to be dispatchable, it has to be reliable, and address all the other concerns that people used to talk about when they would talk about renewable energy.
Yeah. Do you think Canada and the U.S. have been in lockstep in terms of, because they have different political environments, or has Canada moved in a different, just the difference between the two?
Yeah. I mean, everything that happens in the States is bigger than Canada, frankly. It's
No.
obviously so we had a good run of it with Ontario doing the Green Energy Act, I guess about 11, 12 years ago, but it really petered down. But the exciting thing was that a part of Canada that's not been known for its renewable energy, Alberta, because it's where the oil sands are, it really was booming. And a lot of fantastic activity has been happening there. Morgan Solar did some projects there, but and it's got the best wind resource, the best solar resource. Unfortunately, at the moment, the current authorities have put a pause on some of the projects
Provincial
there.
or federal?
Provincial. I mean, the
Okay.
federal government is quite behind the, expanding renewable energy, but the current government there is saying that it needs to have a pause to reassess certain things.
What is that, the oil lobby? Don't you say anything. I'm going to say it. The oil lobby has come in to say, wait a minute, you
One
guys
might
are...
suspect, yes. But here, I think there's a similar sort of like profile you'd say with Texas. It's known as an oil state, but it's been booming and it's been very proactive about it, and that also wins over people. It's creating jobs, creating value, and it is low cost. It's not something that someone's subsidizing unduly. It does its thing, and that's what people want. They don't care about the technology, they care about what it does for them, and renewable energy does a lot for people.
So we're both excited about what we see here at this show. It seems to me the tipping point has arrived. I want to say, okay, but that's not all. What's the rest of the story? Talk about some of the challenges we still have in the industry that we're here. There's some people here to try to overcome, but what do we still have to overcome?
I think something that's inevitable with this technology. I mean, as we said, this is a value chain that has many different players.
Yeah.
From the panels, the modules, developing, the financing, everything. And they all have to get along. And every time something new comes out, it's an opportunity and a challenge, because this is an industry where the mode of operation is you take the biggest risks at the start. You invest all the money in the project getting built, and then you hope that things go the way you could foresee it at the time for 30 years at this point. And you're dealing with outdoor environments, regulatory issues, and the like. But so whenever you have new entrants who are trying to push the technology forward, move society forward, the question is how do I trust them for 20, 30 years? And I think that's always going to be a challenge, because you want to move forward, but you also have to manage risk. And that's, I think, always going to be a conundrum. But fortunately, I think the answer to these things is always better data, better decisions.
That's why I want to switch it a little bit right now. I want to talk about Morgan Solar. You've mentioned data, and I'm a data freak. I just think monitoring, the machines will tell you what's wrong if you let them tell you and help make decisions. And you need data to do that, right?
You definitely
need
do.
massive amounts of data. So I'm a data freak. You mentioned data and where we are now. What does Morgan Solar provide, and where are you guys in that whole chain of process?
Well, I think the journey with data, as it would make sense, as these projects are growing. I mean, you might remember the days when 2 megawatts was utility scale.
Oh, yeah.
And these days it's you drive north of where we are right now, and you see projects that are whole valleys. They're hundreds of megawatts.
Take a whole dry lake and fill it with megawatts of power or solar.
So naturally, the industry started by looking at the places that were easier to monitor, because there was fewer pipes of data, and they were closer to what was associated with what your money was, what your revenues were. So it's a revenue meter and inverters, say. But what was being left behind for that period of the journey was everything that was upstream of that. So everything on what we would say is the DC side of the field, the solar panels, the combiner boxes, and the rest of that was sort of being lost. And there's a lot of really meaty information there, because at the end of the day, that's what's generating your electricity.
Yeah.
And so, there's different ways you need to look at that. Obviously, being able to scale the solutions of sourcing the data. So if it's going to rely on having human beings get into trucks, drive to these places, shutting the field down and measuring stuff, that was never going to make sense. Some of the answers may be going up into the sky with aerial thermography to find your needle in the haystack problems. That's obviously been well understood for a while. But there's other things that are happening at the module level that I think remain obscured in a lot of ways. And what we're very excited about now is we have a technology that lets you look into those issues. So what we would say is the DC health side of the data equation is starting to come to the fore. And what does that mean? It's informing things like how are plants being operated. O&M has always been a challenge. People want to spend as little as possible at it, but they don't want to cut the nose to spite the face. Second thing is the medium-term asset management side. Am I getting what I paid for? Is this thing living up to its warranty? That's a big concern. But now with 20 to 30-year projects, you also have to think about, am I going to be meeting my revenue projections 10 years out?
Yeah.
And how can I look at what's happening now in a way that's going to inform what that's going to look like later? And I think when you were looking at those traditional data sources I spoke about earlier, there really wasn't the insights available to you.
Yeah.
And we see solutions, including our own, as being the kinds of thing that are the tea leaves that will help you read the future and understand what those long-term projections for revenue can look like.
Talk about your unique solution.
Our unique solution is, so what we have is, it's a bit technical jargon here, but it's an in situ IV curve tracer. Right? Yeah. So
you just geeked out on me
I
there,
know.
Hugo.
The way I like to think of it when I'm talking to regular folk, I'd say it's like having an X-ray of your body or an MRI once a minute. And so there's been a lot of talk over the last few years about a digital twin, something that's showing you what the reality of your project is in real time. And that we have a technology that's easily deployed. So once you've put it on the site, it doesn't require any cables, you can leave it there and you're getting this steady flow of information. And it's not just on a sunny day once a year or something like that. It's all the time, all the conditions. And what it's looking at is, what is the true status of your module? What it can do, what it is doing, what it ought to be doing because of what you paid for. And a lot of that information gets obscured because of the other factors that get brought in when you're tying 10,000 of these together and putting them through an inverter. We are looking at that in isolation, not on all modules, just a statistically relevant sample of them because it has to be CapEx efficient. But that information then you can use to tell all sorts of things. How to optimize your O&M, how to look at your warranty, those long-term revenue projections I spoke about. And that's what we're really excited about. And beyond that, that's the sort of, if we're dealing with a specific customer who might be an asset owner or an operator, but we're also collecting what we think is probably the world's largest database of these IV curve traces that are also telling you how certain technologies in a stack, it's a module on a rack with an inverter, how those are behaving in lots of different environments. And that massive data, as we are seeing ever since ChatGPT shook up the world, is that for a long time, conversations about AI seemed a little bit more marketing oriented than truth. It was really machine learning being dressed up as AI.
Yeah.
But now we know that deep, rich data sets really do enable insights that are not obvious to people, but you need that rich data set. And we are accumulating that from many gigawatts of projects across the world. And that makes us excited because there's a whole other set of offerings that we'll be able to bring to all the stakeholders involved in solar, not just the asset owners, that we think are going to help move the industry forward.
So every customer is a supplier.
Exactly. It's like the social media platform, right?
Exactly right.
You bought it, but you're the product. Yes.
Well, Hugo, it's been great. Brilliant.
Appreciate it very
interview.
much.